You can't replace part of the brain. Like, you
treat them the same.
A source of truth for the MedTech industry.
Coexists with the province.
Robot understands things automatically.
Number one show in the MedTech industry.
So Stryker got ahead of that and changed in the 90s, built $1 billion company that held up high, a lot of things.
State of MedTech with your host, Omar and Khateeb.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. We have another really exciting and interesting startup, founder and CEO joining us today. That's Andy Doraiswamy, who's joining us as CEO and founder of Koya Medical. So lymphedema is something that every clinician has to deal with. Not a lot of innovation in the space, unfortunately, until Koya came around. Koya's got a really interesting device and, more importantly, a very innovative way of actually dealing with lymphedema. And we'll get into that in a moment. Some interesting data that's come out. But first of all, Andy, thank you so much for joining the show. How are you doing?
Doing great, Omar. Thanks for the invite.
Absolutely. Before we talk about, I guess, some of the clinical side and also some of the data that's come out from Koya, give us a little bit of background on yourself for the investors and clinicians listening. Who is Andy? How did you get started and how did you end up founding this company?
Yeah, the Koya was born out of my personal experience with my dad. But maybe just a brief background about myself. Andy Doraiswamy, founder and CEO of Koya. I was trained several decades ago as a chemical engineer, and then eventually became more interested in the materials and biomaterials side. So became a scientist with a focus in biomaterials and did some pretty advanced research work at the Naval Research Lab as well as the University in North Carolina. And then I decided I wanted to become a mountaineer after I got my PhD. So went and trained to become a high altitude mountaineer in Nepal for like
That's
6
amazing.
months.
By the way, so I have a friend who does mountaineering, and I think that there's a list of just like really cool things that you can do as a guy. And I think I don't know, sailing the ocean for months on end is one thing. The other side is mountaineering because it takes a lot of physical strength. There's a lot of mental fortitude that's required, and of course training. That's amazing. What was that like?
It was transformative. I think a lot of who I am today is because of that transformation. I think mountain, like you said, I think emotionally, physically, mentally, every which way, you've got to find out what you're made of and what you will become, right? So for me, I think it was a pivotal moment in my life. I was in my early 20s. I had just finished my PhD, and I wanted to discover myself, right? And that's why I climbed in months on end in the middle of nowhere. And it was very important for me to do that. And when I did that, I came back at the base camp in Nepal and was experiencing a cataract camp where they do free surgeries for the villages and people around the village. If you've seen Nat Geo work, I'm sure you've seen some of those, right? Where kids and adults walk from village to village for days, right? So I saw that firsthand, where they would get free cataract surgery, less than 10 minutes in a makeshift school. And I sort of fell in love with it. I was trained as a biomedical engineer, and I said, okay, great. I need to do more of this. And right place, right time. The next move that I made was to find a group that was looking for intraocular lenses and innovations in that. So I was fortunate to meet some of the legendary investors in healthcare who had a very profound effect on ophthalmology across the globe. So my role there initially was to help invent an intraocular lens that goes through a very small incision that folds like a taco and then opens in your eye. And the whole procedure is less than 10 minutes, very safe, one of the safest procedures. In fact, it was one of the very first medical devices, was an intraocular lens back in the 1980s, right? So very profound, life-changing, sight-giving, and that's my first love, right? So I fell in love with ophthalmology, fell in love with innovation, and saw what the power of an idea with the right team, with the right culture, the right processes can do. So that implant has now treated over 10 million people globally. Bausch & Lomb currently markets it under Envista. And then there's a company in Japan called Santon Pharmaceuticals that markets it in Japan, right? Very profound. Did another company in ophthalmology and really fell in love with innovation. And about 5, 6 years ago, I hit home, right? So my dad, who was 75, 76, and just had recently retired, went through prostatic cancer. As most men who live long enough, unfortunately, it's very common, like breast cancer for women, it's a risk as we age. So in his case, they removed his prostate, surgery, chemo, things like that. And lo and behold, his leg started swelling, right? So that was a birth. That was like the unmet need right before my eyes. As a healthcare innovator who's done this before a few times, yes, I wanted to do something about it.
It's interesting is that, because your background was really focused on, I guess, on ophthalmology. I saw that also you did, a little bit of, you did a venture in urology and then essentially this venture into lymphedema. Um, like roughly if you think about the market size, like let's just look at the here in the US, like how many people are essentially affected by lymphedema and where most commonly? All right, everyone, quick commercial break. If you're a MedTech CEO/founder, or maybe you're a sales or marketing leader at a startup or a scale up, you're going to want to listen to this. Are you struggling to get in front of your ideal audience, whether that's investors or perhaps clinicians who want to adopt your product? Maybe you're getting ghosted. You send emails and messages and nothing comes back, nothing happens, right? Or worse, nobody knows who you are, right? In business, visibility is everything. And I always tell people, if you want to persuade before persuasion can happen, you have to learn how to get attention. So if your sales team is desperate for traction, clinicians don't know your name, investors have never heard of you, you're losing opportunities every day. And that needs to change now. Not tomorrow, not next week, now. That's where my company, Khateeb & Co. comes in. We don't just do marketing, we do growth. We figure out how to engineer markets by creating magnetic messaging that makes you impossible to ignore. And we build high impact strategies, of course, using social media, but other channels such as email, text, and others to help turn content and messaging into commercial pipeline, and it leads into closed deals. As an example, we worked with a surgical robotics company in raising a $31 million Series A, and then they needed help on their pre-market release. So we packed their CRM with 198 surgeon leads and nurtured them down. That ended up becoming 4 closed hospitals. 4 hospitals closed and adopted this technology within a period of 6 months, and they got 2 great key opinion leaders in the process. So whether you're a startup founder wearing too many hats, or maybe you have a marketing team that's just spread too thin and they don't have the expertise, my team and I plug in and partner up with your company, and we amplify your reach. From crafting powerful sales scripts to optimizing your team's demo calls, creating content, having it go out on a consistent basis, we transform your outreach into a growth engine. So if you're ready to dominate your market, you're ready to become a known name and people to know of you and take your calls and take your meetings, I want you to act right now. Don't wait anymore because you've already wasted plenty of time. Go to growmymedtech.com. That's growmymedtech.com. And I want you to schedule a quick call. My team and I will give you a free analysis with 2 to 3 actionable ideas. There's no strings attached. And if we're a fit, great. We can get partnered up and we can help you go to the next level. And if not, look, the ideas are always free. So do not wait and don't waste any more time. Go to growmymedtech.com right now and let's make you the go-to name in your niche. Now, let's get back to the episode.
Yeah, one of the fundamental problems with lymphedema, as the word suggests, it's edema due to poor lymph movement, right? So hence swelling. And it's very underdiagnosed. So even in my dad's case, I, as a pretty active healthcare innovator, had to ask, what's going on, right? Instead of saying, yep, you've got lymphedema, here's who to see, right? So there's a clear case of underdiagnosis for the space. The diagnosed ICD codes in terms of what's out there in the US is around 1.5 to 2 million annually, right? The prevalence is as high as 20 million, and I'll explain why. When you think of lymph and the vascular system, basically what's happening in your body is circulation is happening, right? Your heart is pumping blood everywhere to every cell, every pore in your body to nourish. And the cell does what it needs to do to energize and take the nutrients, and then it comes back through your venous system. Everybody knows this, right? But the venous system is not just coming back through the venous system, it's coming back through the lymphatic system as well. The veins in your lymph are part of your vasculature, right? So lymph carries a lot of protein-rich, slower moving, a slower order of magnitude processing, and it comes through the capillary action. So if you look at a lymph in a vein, it looks very similar in the valvular structures and the muscle that has evolved. So think of lymph as a primordial or from an evolutionary standpoint, an older circulatory system without an active heart. The muscle is what evolved to build the heart, right? So lymph and your venous system comes back and it dumps back into the heart. Both of them do, and it circulates through the gut and it clears. That's how your lymph system works. Very important. But lymph and veins are like siblings, not even cousins, right? So when we built this, I saw this firsthand with my dad when they removed some of his nodes, as they commonly do during cancer surgeries or upper extremity or lower. Very common to remove nodes because you don't want the cancer to spread. So what you're left with is a chronic condition where your circulatory system is affected, right? In this case, due to cancer surgery. But the second biggest reason is your venous system malfunction. So over age, chronic venous disease, you're in MedTech, you know how that works with a SEEP score. C4 is edema, right? That too is superficial venous system is where it hits first. And then it goes into the deeper system with occlusion, with deep veins. But edema is a common factor because it's either going where it's not supposed to or it's getting occluded. So chronic edema, it's called lymphedema on the venous side. And the estimate there, as you may know, is nearly 35% of the US population has it. You just have to be at an airport and you can point every patient that walks by, right? They usually go get a vein ablated or close through phone therapy, etc. But when we saw all this, when we first saw this, we said, wow, we need to do something about this, right? Patients need care at home. Let's figure out where the unmet need is. And started off with my dad and firsthand experiencing how that works. And we said, wow, this is a huge opportunity to impact, even bigger than ophthalmology. So let's go do something about it. So we assembled a team and we have built Koya now. We're a commercial stage company. We're more than 100 people now, very experienced folks. And our mission is to focus on transforming lymphatic and venous care, right? We're not just doing lymphedema, we're looking to transform vascular care.
You know, what's interesting about the space is, and I wonder if you can kind of, comment on this. So when you think about like chronic vascular care, it's a huge industry, right? I don't want to say industry, it's a huge market. So it's probably one of the biggest ones in healthcare because we've all seen whether it's lymphedema, something that's very common in the same spaces like varicose veins and stuff, right? And it's very visible, right? But for some reason, it's like one of the larger areas of healthcare, but it's also very much underserved. Like again, I've been doing this show for a very long time, and in terms of this space, I think you're like one of 2 or 3 companies I've actually interviewed on the show. The other one was focused more on varicose veins. Why do you think it's such an underserved area when the numbers are that big in terms of the patient populations that are affected?
Well, it's tough, right? Anything chronic and slow moving is very difficult to one, diagnose and to treat. These are incurable conditions. So unlike a cataract surgery where I pop in an artificial lens, boom, you're able to see again, an acute solve, you're cured, right, of blindness. Similarly, with anything on the arterial side, if I remove a clot from your brain and stroke or anything acute, if you typically notice, is much easier, right? I'm not saying it's easier from a building the company standpoint, but the signal's there, you're immediately given it a solution. Anything chronic or a bit more nuanced in the mechanism, requires more brain power, more patience, engaging a lot of stakeholders, right? Payers care about this, physicians care about this. Of course, your patients care about this, but it's a slow-moving progression.
What's the current standard? So like let's go back in time before Koya even existed. What was the current standard of care or status quo on how you essentially treat lymphedema?
Correct. So lymphedema or chronic edema, even through venous disease, is treated the same way, right? So when my dad was when we first observed this, I called my sister, who is an oncologist at one of the leading institutions, and she said, "Yeah, I see this all the time with my patients, almost in a very casual way." And I'm a guy who was looking for a nail, so everything looks like a nail to me. And I said, "What can we do about this?" She said, "This is likely lymphedema because its nodes are removed." So fortunately, I found one of the leading surgeons and leading thought leaders in the world of lymphedema at Stanford, and I met with him and I said, "What can we do?" So he said, "Well, we can give them compression garments, but those are hard to use to put on because they're already pretty stiff, very elastic.
Those are
But
essentially
still,
just the compression socks that you often see, like
compression socks.
yeah,
I
like
don't know if
very
you tried putting them on.
yeah, it was they're really yeah. So they work really well because they're so stiff. But again, like
Right.
the people that usually have lymphedema, they're not young guys like me. They're
No,
older patients and they're not particularly
correct.
strong. And a lot of times they don't have a caretaker even.
Correct.
So
They
the
don't have a
compliance
caretaker either,
well.
right? So
Yeah.
there's a need right there, and adherence is usually very, very poor with these socks in the patients, right? Um, so if you don't use it, you don't get the benefit. So one is compression socks, and my dad has dexterity issues now, so that's very difficult to put on. The second thing they prescribed was a pump, essentially like a CPAP machine that's plugged into the wall, and you're required to lay down, and it inflates and deflates through air. It's like an airplane,
Those are
right?
considered pneumatic devices because they put air into it, right?
Correct. Pneumatic meaning air, so you're literally pushing air in and out of these. So tubes within tubes, there's a bunch of tubes in this. So we bought that for him, and he basically said, "That looks like a heart and lung machine. I'm not going to use it," right? So he refused to use it right off the bat. So the thought for us was, how many other patients are basically not willing to engage because the therapy is just so bloody difficult to use, right? And the barrier to entry is high. And with these folks, cancer survivors or chronic venous disease, they all want to be active. They all want to keep moving. They don't want to be treated like they're a chronic patient, right? They want to live. And one of our cancer survivor patients said, "There's a lot of life packed in an hour because hour is the treatment for these devices, right? So every day you got to clear your lymph system and your venous return, push it back. It works, but if nobody is willing to use it or engage with it and the friction is too high, you've got a problem, right? And hence, we gave birth to a solution.
And that product is DaySpring, correct? And for the
Correct.
audience, for audience that's watching either on Spotify and YouTube, so I want to bring up one of the videos that you guys have on your YouTube channel of the device. Maybe you can kind of give us a play by play, but something that stood out to me was the ease of, again, the adherence side, because there's a lot of great solutions out there in healthcare, but a lot of times you have to think like, okay, well, like how often is a patient gonna be able to use this? So I'm going to share this one where essentially they're putting on a lower leg garment, but essentially
Correct.
it it looks very easy to use. And yeah, if you can kind of walk us through a little bit on this.
You bet. So this is a garment where a patient can don on their own. Donning and doffing is the number one problem. And we designed these magnetic clips, which you see in the video here, where you can just pull the strap. It's custom fit to that patient and you snap it on. Very easy, right? Alternating straps that you can just pull the tab. So minimally you get the static compression benefit. And then you plug it into a portable lithium ion battery controller, very small, and you click play. And what it does is it allows you to have the garment come to life. So each of these segments that you see have actuators built in them, right? Very advanced engineering using some advanced materials.
Very much like a robotic system has actuators. That's
You
what
got it.
it's doing. Oh, interesting. Okay.
A robotic system for the actuator and the intelligence in the controller to talk to your phone, to know how patients are engaging. A lot of intelligence. We call it natural intelligence. There is some artificial intelligence in there too. But really, the idea is to engage. Step one, engage. Make sure it's easy to use and engage with the device. Once you start using it, there are three modalities that we believe really help from the past work that has been done in this space. One is the static compression that we talked about, which is very important. The second is the active pushing of the capillary and the venous return, right? Both on the venous side and the lymph side. Blood likes to move, so does lymph, right? Stagnant stasis is not good. The third aspect is patients today are supine and laying down when they're getting treatment, right? The last thing these patients should be doing, especially in the case of chronic vascular disease, is lack of movement, right? They need to be running, they need to be moving. So we literally cut the cord of these tubes and things that require you to be tepid and allow movement. I mean, as simple as that sounds, it's important.
No, it's very important. Actually, I noticed that because, for me, I'm not an athlete, but I work out a lot. And so something that, it's funny, before we actually got introduced, I had this conversation with somebody a while back because one of the more popular devices, I'm sure some of the audience thought about this, is that, in the recovery space for athletes and everything, there's a company called Hyperice that has these devices that go on your legs or your arms that inflate, right? It's a pneumatic device, right? And, essentially it's just circulates your blood and pushes like inflammation out and everything, which is fine if you're a healthy person and you just need like a little recovery. One of my friends who's it was really coincidental. Like a month ago, we were talking about it. He said, well, for like lymphedema and for patients, like, why don't they just use Hyperice? Like, couldn't Hyperice be a great medical device? And my thinking, and I think you validated it, is that it can't be, because for a patient, they would have to use it like you can't walk around with that device. It's huge. And it's more importantly, it's done through air. So your device using those actuators, number one, improves the adherence and compliance of patients to use it. Plus, because of the fact that it's not tethered by a cord, all these other devices have to be plugged into an outlet. Your patients can actually turn this on and walk around. So it's almost going to enhance the therapy.
It does, right? So I think you're absolutely right. And there are a lot of nuances in how the mechanism work in terms of the pressure you apply and how all these features come in together. For example, your skin is like your greatest lymphatic system, right? That's where most of the absorption happens, to fill the lymphatic system through the capillaries. So it's very important that all modalities are engaged. You have to use it. And unlike an athlete, these patients have to deal with this for the rest of their life, right? So engagement, adherence is very important. And we ended up investing as we started building the company from day one. We started running clinical studies, right? So we've got about a dozen clinical studies, a couple of dozen publications, including 2 randomized controlled trials, which is unheard of in the home health space. But given our background in running interventional projects, we knew that was going to be important to establish a new category, right? And through those studies, through those proof points, we were able to engage with CMS and commercial payers and the VA, right? We've got a federal supply schedule with the VA to issue new codes, which is a rare thing. And you're on MedTech, Omar, it's not something that people don't hand out codes easily. So they recognize this as a great unmet need on the vascular and the oncology side. And 2, they're thankful we're doing something about this. So they've given us our own unique codes here and payments and coverage to say we recognize this as a problem worth solving.
That's amazing. And I think the other thing, I don't have any way to validate is one of the reasons why I believe that the home health space, you haven't seen a lot of innovation, even though it seems obvious because it's a massive market, right? Is that it just historically has not been a very sexy space. And so the investments haven't been great. And if you don't have money, it costs money to actually do anything innovative, right? Then you don't end up with a great company. You guys have raised, according to Crunchbase, a little north of 70 million. You have some great investors on your board. So you have OrbiMed, Cadence Ventures, 3x5 Partners, Arboretum, and I'm sure I'm leaving a few out, right?
Arboretum and American Century,
Yeah.
they're seasoned investors. They care about the mission of impact. So yeah, we've been very fortunate to have some really strong backers to to solve these chronic unmet needs.
And it sounds like you aside from having like a truly innovative product, so again, like using actuators for a non-pneumatic device, right, is really important. The product itself, just looking at it again, it's not a very sexy space, but it's a very innovative looking product. It looks like a great consumer product, right? Um, I think the other side of it is that you guys have done some great work on the clinical trial side. So you guys had a publication that came out that was really interesting called the T study. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Why was that? Why is that such an important study? It came out in the I think the journal.
Of vascular surgery.
There we go.
Correct.
Yeah, tell us about that study. And for those who want to look it up, it's Teas is spelled TEAYS.
Correct. That was a very important milestone. But before I go into this, you made a comment saying it's not as sexy. I would say it's very sexy, I guess, depending on what the definition of sexy is.
Floyd bringing sexy back to the home healthcare space.
Yeah, there we go. I think the way we see it is as follows, right? You said it, right? Chronic venous disease and vascular disease, one of the greatest unmet need, very difficult to solve, right? So the question that we're asking is, clearly the market is there, right? How do you go about this is really the point, right? And in some cases, if you can go about it in a pretty known, sort of well charted out path, we think it's sexy. But if it's mountaineering with no clear path, no escalators, then we may think it's not sexy, right? But it is sexy, I think, to climb. And the point I'm making here is it's a huge problem worth solving. And one of the ways we're looking to do that is connect the continuum of care at what happens in the home, what happens in the office, and what happens in the surgery. And I can elaborate on that. What happens in the home is the study we just ran, which is the T study, where we said, let's do a head-to-head against the standard of care today, right? So it's a randomized control study with head-to-head in assigning patients with either our approach, which is DaySpring, or one of the things that has been in for 20 years, one of these advanced pneumatic compression devices. And then they cross over after a month with a 1-month washout. We follow them each for a total of 7 months. It was the duration of the study itself, right? And what we found is we've met all the primary and secondary endpoint. It was a home run for us, and this is the publication that's out there. We saw a nearly 4-time response in terms of the volume reduction. So the volume of the limb is measured. This was done for the lower extremity. We saw nearly a 2-time increase in adherence. We knew that going in that this would be the thesis, but it's great to see this in a controlled, prospective, multi-centered study. And beyond that, quality of life, we looked at movement, we looked at use of compression garments, all very favorable, right? So that was recently published in a well-known and well-respected journal called the Journal of Vascular Surgery, because that is one of our audience, right? Vascular has become our primary focus now. Oncology is still a great focus, but the need is great.
That's fantastic. And what are some other studies that you envision happening in the near future? Because essentially, would you say the category that you guys are creating is non-pneumatic devices? Would that be the category, or is there something bigger than that?
Non-pneumatic devices in the home health space to treat the disease. So I think what I see at a high level, and you may see this since you're very much in the know and current, is there's a lot of movement happening due to cost pressure and disease management from hospitals to ASCs to the office, right? There's that movement happening. But those that were done in the office and can be managed at home better on the treatment side, not just the diagnostics, are also being done at home more and more, right? And there are a lot more home health treatment companies today than they were even 5 years ago, right? So people are recognizing, why wouldn't I manage my health at home? So we're doing that through DaySpring. So we're commercial now. We've got a strong commercial team. We're doing all of it, right? So we have direct links with the payers, with our customers being vascular surgeons and oncology clinics. And we get to know the patient, right? We get to know them because we demo the device to use them. We manage the patients for the clinic. So it's really fantastic to have a firsthand knowledge of what the patient is going through, right? What are their needs? What is the clinical need?
Yeah, and I think what's very much needed is that, without naming names, because I know the companies that at least in this space, the main companies that have the incumbent products are really, really big companies, and the market is kind of owned by a tiny handful, so they really have no incentive to innovate. And so I love the fact that you guys are being not only innovative but taking a true, like tech and consumer focus, like meeting with the patients, getting the that kind of like user experience. I want to bring up the study. I think I pulled it up here, and I want to see if you can kind of comment on some of the graphs here. Um, I'm almost certain this is the correct study, correct?
Correct. That is the correct study. Yeah.
Yeah, for the audience who's watching, like, can you talk share can you talk through like some of these charts here? Because I think it's like quite significant, but I wanted you to kind of talk us through.
Correct. So your body, as we discussed earlier, for all of us, generates lymph and generates, obviously blood is moving through your body. But as we age or if we encounter diseases, the lower extremities start swelling. If you've ever flown on a long flight, or could see sort of edema temporarily in those cases, right? Imagine if you had that chronically, you would want that fluid to be removed from that extremity. In upper extremity, it's your full arm. Sometimes your hand swells too, and then the lower extremity, it's your full leg. If that's swollen on a regular basis, the underlying fluid needs to be flushed out because it's full of toxins, and the risk of cellulitis, ulceration, episodic failures is very high and very expensive. It'll require you to be hospitalized. So one of the first things you measure is lymph volume in milliliters, right? Can you remove the lymph volume as quickly as possible and maintain it at that? So in this case, what you're looking at is the response between NPCD, which is the non-pneumatic compression device, nearly 4 times the effect size that you get. This is measured over a 3-month period from baseline to the response time itself. So obviously the pneumatic pumps work, which is great. But the question, as we discussed earlier, is can you use all the modalities that have been proven? Can you make the move? Can you apply static? Can you also have the active portion in this? So we're hoping to bring all these trimodal aspects to use.
Yeah, and again, like visually for the audience who's not like seeing this, in terms of like the advanced pneumatic device, which was the DaySpring compared to pneumatic, the score that we're seeing is like 369 compared to 83. So like the statistical difference here is like quite large. Usually when I see these kind of trials done, there's like a marginal difference, but it's not statistically significant. But even to the average person, you can see there's quite a difference here. And I want to scroll down again. I'm going to leave a link to the T study in the show notes for our audience to go check out. But again, when you look at this comparing to the status quo, like there is quite a statistical and even visual difference. I think the chart that stood out the most to me was here, the overall lymphedema quality of life questionnaire. Can you talk to us? Like, I feel like this is the kind of the home run for this paper. You tell me if I'm wrong, but tell me a little bit about this one.
Yeah, I would say it's very impactful, right? We're very excited that we're able to bring something new that is patients have another option for a new category, not another same old, right? This particular graph talks about quality of life and how it is profound. For those patients living with a chronic condition, this is a validated score that patients report on: symptom, mood, function, can they function in daily life, things like that, right? Even a simple anecdote is one of the common things we hear is when they use the pneumatic devices or things that are tepid, they often have to pee a lot, right? Because your body is generating, the fluid's getting pushed, and your kidney starts to filter more, and your bladder gets full, right? So in the middle of a treatment session, you may have to use the restroom, or and sometimes you have to answer the door. So simple things that we take for granted makes a huge difference in their quality of life because they're independent now. They no longer have to depend on someone else to help them or pause treatment. So they can go about it, and the treatment is sort of in the background, right? Is the idea. So quality of life is, to your point, very, very important.
Yeah, and by the way, just so the audience understands, because I think this is such an important point you're hitting on. Because again, there's this part of MedTech that we need to get better about, which is user experience. So just something as simple as going to the bathroom. So imagine with the previous devices, you're having to lay down, and so it's going to take an hour to do. If you have to go to the bathroom, that's not going to take 5 minutes. You have to literally take the stuff off. You have to walk over to the bathroom, go to the bathroom. And for a lot of the patient population who's using these devices, that might be like, it might take a solid 15 or 20 minutes. And so the time of treatment isn't really an hour with those older devices. It could be up to 2 hours. And at that point, patients aren't going to be doing it. And so they're going to end up having like poor outcomes versus your device. Again, I'm going to make I'm not making a claim here. This is my personal opinion, but it could be argued that because the device can be put on the patients, they can be mobile, etc., that the the time of treatment might be less than an hour, because it's not only that they're able to be mobile and it's consistent, but again, like they're actually moving around versus the old devices. It's like, oh, you need to do an hour, but they're sitting down, all these different things. So I think I'm really excited to see like more data coming out from the company on this.
You bet. No, thank you. I think adherence is, as someone once said, I think is very obvious, but if you don't use it, you're not going to get the benefit, right? So that's where it begins. You have to engage and you have to make it easier for patients to get on board and stay on board.
Absolutely. Now, as we kind of round things out, I'm wondering if you can kind of share like a little bit about like what's your big vision for Koya? Going into 2025. We're recording this at the end of the year in 2024. So by the time it's out, this will be in 2025. But what are some of your big visions for the company?
Yeah, no, thank you. I think, and it's obviously a great way to close out the year. There's a lot happening, and it's been very good for MedTech. But 2025, there's a lot of optimism across the industry. More happening. As far as Koya is concerned, it's been a beautiful dream for me personally and for our leadership and our team. We have been able to attract some of the best talents in the industry, best leaders to come and transform venous and lymphatic care. We're in the early innings of it. We're commercial with a transformative product for patients with a new category where payers are engaged with us to cover, to pay, which is, again, as you may know, not easy, right? Those barriers are hard, but we're able to do that. We're national now with respect to access. So patients have access to this through their clinicians. We're expanding. So 2025 for us is going to be a year of expansion to have a stronger footprint. We've treated about 10,000 patients to date, right? It's a remarkable. But the number of folks that suffer from this in the US alone is in the millions. So we're barely getting started. So I think the work is yet to be done, and we're energized to go do more of that. Broadly for our vision, something you mentioned is this disease is very difficult with a chronic venous disease. So our pipeline is rich. Some of the inventions we currently are working on now will also be involved in venous closures, superficial venous closures. As you know, there's tremendous unmet need there too, because those things haven't changed in 20 years, very antiquated, a lot of pain points, no pun intended. And it's our patient, right? The same patient that we treat with DaySpring is the one that's going through these diseases. It's the same physician in most cases that's treating them with it. We also will be deeper into the venous system. Our background is intervention as well. So we're not looking to build a home health company. That's not the vision. Our goal is to connect across the continuum of care for what the patient needs and what the physician needs. Really, that's the business of healthcare.
Amazing. Well, I'm really excited for you guys. It's going to be a fun 2025 following you. So I'm hoping to have you back in a year from now, just kind of give a report and update. But before we hop off, so one, I want to tell the audience, for the investors and physicians listening, number one, check the show notes below. I'm leaving the T study in there. That way you can read it yourself. Go to koyamedical.com. They have a lot of publications and good information on there. Of course, you're on LinkedIn. But going into 2025, are there any medical conferences or even investor conferences that people can expect to find you guys at, whether they want to meet you as from an investor standpoint or even a clinical standpoint? What conferences are coming up that you guys will be at?
Yeah, we'll be at the JP Morgan along with the rest of the crew, and happy to meet anyone that is interested in finding synergies in January. Beyond that, we're at all the major vascular conferences. So whether it's the American Venous Forum, Society for Vascular Medicine, VEIT, American Venous and Lymphatic Society, we're very active. And I'm also happy to report the ecosystem has welcomed us with open arms for innovation. So it's an exciting time, especially for venous and lymphatic medicine, to do more.
Fantastic. Well, Andy, look, thank you so much for coming on the show again. For listeners who are checking it out, go to koyamedical.com, check the show notes below for the T study, and we'll see you all next time. I'm your host, Omar Khateeb. Be sure to subscribe for the show. Give us 5 stars, write that review. That's why the #1 show, because of you, the audience. And we'll see you all next time. Thanks for checking out this episode. If you want to do me a big favor and join so many other people who have helped grow this podcast, take a second and look below. If you're on Apple, give us 5 stars and write a short review. If you're on Spotify, just give us 5 stars. And if you're on YouTube, hit the like button. And most importantly, if you can, subscribe. We release so many different episodes that you may miss. Be sure to subscribe and turn your notifications on. You get extra points with me if you subscribe across all 3 channels. Thank you so much. And if you felt like this episode helped you, send this to somebody who'd really enjoy and appreciate it. Share and spread the love. We'll see you all next time.